You look like garbage. Her voice cut through the clink of silverware. I froze. Every eye turned. Heat crawled up my neck. I'm Aria, 32. I work at a homeless shelter. It gives me purpose. But my mother, Diane? She calls it a waste. She calls me a waste. That Thanksgiving, I arrived late. Hospital soap still on my skin. Boots, sweater, no pearls or heels. She scanned me up and down. And then those words. Words I'd heard in 100 disguises. Usually I'd shrink, smile, apologize for existing. But not this time. Not anymore. This time I stood. Tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. And subscribe if you've ever fought to defend your worth. I grew up in Connecticut. A picture-perfect suburb. Lawns trimmed, smiles rehearsed. Inside our colonial house, perfection ruled. My mother Diane demanded it. My father Robert expected it. And Catherine, my younger sister, delivered it. Flawless grades. Graceful posture. Perfect daughter. Me? I was awkward. Dreamy. Messy. At 10, I brought home a painting. Bright colors. Praised at school. I pinned it to the fridge. She looked once. This is sloppy, Aria. Catherine's is better. Mine ended up in the recycling bin. At 16, I saved for prom. A purple gown, silver accents. I felt beautiful. She sighed. That looks cheap. Everyone will know it's from the mall. Photos still taken. Later, I heard her laughing on the phone. At graduation, I wore my cap proudly. Cum laude, top of my class. She fussed with my hair. Couldn't you do better? Catherine always looks perfect. The words never stopped. They carved grooves in my skin. Nothing I did was ever enough. Dad rarely stepped in. Diane, that's enough, he'd say softly. Then retreat back into silence. Silence can bruise as deeply as words. When I chose social work, their faces fell. Mom laughed. You'll throw your education away. Dad shook his head. You're too smart for this. Do something real. But helping people was real. Seeing lives rebuilt mattered more than status. Yet in their eyes, I was throwing my life away. Catherine became a dermatologist. Her practice thrived. She married a doctor. 2 perfect sons, the family crown jewels. Meanwhile, I was the failure, the disappointment, the one they tried to forget. I thought I had grown numb. But that Thanksgiving proved I hadn't. Harbor Hope became my anchor. 40 minutes from their perfect suburb. 7 years there, rising to assistant director. Not glamorous, but real. Meals, beds, chances. Mom still scoffed on rare visits. When will you live like an adult? Dad vanished into calls, presence without protection. Catherine glittered. Thriving practice, magazine house, 2 boys. Dating couldn't survive that split screen. Mark tried. One dinner ended us. It's like they deflate you, he said. He left before dessert. Silence moved in afterward. Grandma Margaret never wavered. She asked, listened, loved without critique. When she asked us home for Thanksgiving, I said yes. I planned the visit like a hazardous route. Neutral topics, modest outfit, mom's wine, leave early if the air soured. Life ignored the plan. At 9:17 a.m., Marion collapsed. 62, 3 months sober, teaching knife skills. One moment laughing, the next rigid. Our nurse knelt. I called 911, cleared space. I rode in the ambulance, holding Marion's hand. At the hospital, I gave history and signed forms. She drifted, returned, drifted again. I waited until her daughter arrived from Hartford. By then it was 2 o'clock. Texts from Catherine stacked up. Centerpieces, schedule, complaints. I replied, seizure hospital stable. No time to change. Hospital soap on my skin. Sweater with a whisper of bleach. Driving into their neighborhood, lawns glittered. Wreaths, lanterns, flawless facades. I parked and faced my reflection. Tired eyes, hair escaping its clip. Not the daughter she curated. I rang the bell, not my key. Guest, not child. Catherine opened, immaculate and exhausted. Thank God, she's impossible, she whispered. Shelter emergency, I said. Seizure, stable now. She sighed, took the wine. Under the radar. Inside, curated warmth and smiles. Grandma beckoned from the fireplace chair. Aria, tell me about your work, she said. I breathed for the first time all day. Then heels clicked from the hallway. Mom arrived like weather. Cream dress, perfect hair, appraisal. Aria, you finally made it, she said. Next time, change before arriving. Dad pressed a distant kiss to my cheek. I swallowed antiseptic in dread. Hoped the night might pass uneventfully. But the air tasted of storm. When I stepped into the dining room, I knew lightning was close. The dining room glittered with crystal and obligation. Perfect napkins, Perfect silence. Mom lifted her glass for the gratitude ritual. I'm thankful for excellence, she began. For Catherine's practice. For Richard's article. Eyes slid past me. When it reached me, I inhaled. I'm grateful for Harbor Hope, I said. This year, 23 found permanent housing. 15 placed in stable jobs. Really, Arya? Mom cut in, voice like a needle. Must you bring those people here? This is a family gathering. A tremor ran through my hand. I set down my fork. I'm also grateful for a college partnership, I continued. Scholarships so residents can... She leaned back, sniffed theatrically. What is that smell? She asked. Her gaze fixed, verdict sharp. Arya, did you even shower? You reek like garbage. Silverware stopped. Conversation died. Dad cleared his throat. So the glazing... His voice withered. Grandma's eyes turned flint. Catherine flushed. No words came. Usually I leave then. Bathroom cry. Quiet exit. I didn't move. I'd like to tell you about my day, I said. My chair scraped softly. I stood. At 9:17, Marion collapsed in our kitchen. 62, former nurse's aide. Stroke stole her apartment. She seized on tile. I held her head. Our nurse kept her breathing. I rode the ambulance. Advocated, uninsured. Waited until her daughter arrived. I came straight here. No time to change. I smell like work, not garbage. And even if I did, would I deserve contempt? From my mother? Years of swallowed words rose. For as long as I remember, I've been wrong to you. Wrong dress, wrong hair, wrong career. Never enough. Dad, your silence taught me this. Peace mattered more than your daughter. He looked down. Catherine spoke, voice thin. Mom, that was cruel, she said. She doesn't deserve that. Mom's chin lifted, defiant. I demand standards, she said. I won't apologize. Grandma's voice rang like a bell. That's enough, Diane. No one rescued the moment. So I kept it. The people you call those people taught me dignity. Resilience you never modeled. Respect without permission. I sat and served mashed potatoes. Silence widened, then changed. Not the old fear. Something different. Alive. Mom stared at her plate. Dad stared at nothing. The course arrived, hands a little shaky. Conversation tried to regrow. Nothing would go back to before. And the next person to speak wasn't my mother. Forks hovered, unsure where to land. Then Dad cleared his throat. Arya, he said, voice unsteady, unfamiliar. I owe you an apology. My chest tightened. The room leaned in. I've watched this for years, he said. I told myself I kept the peace. Truth is, I was a coward. Mom's head snapped toward him. Richard, how dare you? He didn't look at her. Our daughter deserved protection, he said. She didn't get it. From either of us. Words pressed at the seams of my ribs. I kept still. Uncle David spoke next, surprising even himself. I've worn Diane's disapproval, he said quietly. Not like Arya, but enough. Aunt Sarah reached for his hand. We should have spoken sooner, she said. I'm sorry, Arya. Catherine wiped her eyes. Mom, I'm drowning too, she whispered. Anxiety, medication. Last year's weight loss wasn't healthy. Mom blinked, stunned. Her perfect daughter, confessing imperfection. I'm exhausted, Catherine said. It's never enough. Not for you, not for me. Grandma lifted her glass, didn't drink. Diane, she said, voice steady. You were raised by a cruel woman. Your mother starved you for approval. You vowed to do better. But you repeated the pattern. Mom rose, napkin falling like a flag. I won't be attacked in my own home. She looked to Dad, waiting for rescue. He stayed seated. Please sit, he said. We need to hear this. Betrayal flashed across Mom's face. Ice replaced it. She turned and walked out. Heels struck marble like a metronome. Then quiet. The caterers hesitated in the doorway. Dad nodded. Serve, continue. Life reassembling itself without permission. Plates arrived. The room's air felt different. Thinner, but cleaner. I tasted food for the first time all day. Salt, butter, thyme, human. Dad spoke softly, to me, not the room. I can't fix the years, he said. But I can choose differently now. Catherine slid a folded napkin toward me. Her hand found mine beneath the table. Warm, real, trembling. Aunt Sarah broke the tension with a story. Childhood summers, the day Mom cried over a crooked seam. We laughed once, too loud, too relieved. Laughs became breath, became presence. Grandma leaned toward me. Truth breaks porcelain, she said. Let it. We can eat on stoneware. Dad exhaled like a man surfacing. Family counseling, he said. I'll go, whether your mother does or not. It landed like furniture moved to the correct wall. Catherine nodded. I'll find a therapist, she said. For myself, not for her. I looked around the table. At the fractures. At the light slipping through them. I wasn't responsible for patching the cracks. I wasn't the glue. I was a person. The dessert arrived, pumpkin cheesecake without commentary. I took one bite. Sweet, imperfect mine. When I stood to leave, no one begged or scolded. Grandma squeezed my arm. "Keep the fire," she said. At the door, Dad stopped a step behind me. "I'll call tomorrow," he said. "If you're willing." "I'm willing," I answered. Boundary, not surrender. Outside, the air smelled like frost and possibility. I pulled my coat close. Keys, phone, breath. I hadn't won a war. I had chosen one. Myself. And the next morning, I would decide how this story continued. The cafe smelled like winter and dark roast. Dad arrived rumpled, eyes tired. "Your mother's at a hotel," he said. "She needs space." "I didn't speak to hurt her," I said. "I spoke to stop the hurt." He nodded, fingers knotted. "I kept peace," he said. "I abandoned you instead." We talked 2 hours. His theories, her childhood, the cost of perfection. "I can't fix the years," he said. "I can choose differently now." "Start with honesty," I answered. "And respect my boundaries." December brought a different table. Shelter lights, paper plates, laughter. Grandma came, regal and wry. Catherine came, mascara brave. Dad came, finally present. That's where I met Michael. New volunteer, steady voice, gentle eyes. "Coffee sometime?" he asked, drying a tray. "Only if you like messy lives." "I'm an architect," he smiled. "I rebuild for a living." We talked about patterns and boundaries. He didn't flinch. He didn't fix. He listened. Spring layered in. Catherine found a therapist. Named her anxiety out loud. Ate like survival, not performance. I practiced small courage daily. No peacemaker texts. No midnight guilt calls. Yes to sleep walks, ordinary joy. In April, Mom's card arrived. "I'll visit Harbor Hope, Tuesday at 10. I said yes, on my terms. Brief tour. Limited time. Work came first. She arrived in a blue coat. Perfect hair. Careful eyes. "This is Marion," I said. "Volunteer, knife skills teacher." Marion smiled. "You must be proud," she told Mom. "She changes lives here." Mom's mouth curved. Tight, but real. "Arya has always been dedicated," she said. In my office, she studied the board. Thank you notes, schedules, soft-creased photos. "You look content," she said, almost surprised. "I am," I answered. "Not the life you chose, but it's mine." She nodded once. "Board dinner next month," she said. "Bring the architect if you like." Not an apology. An opening. I took it without surrender. Fall slid in. Michael and I found a small house. Secondhand table, mismatched plates, enough. A year later, I hosted Thanksgiving. Shelter friends. Family who could be safe. Grandma's laugh anchored the room. Catherine came without the boys. Her boundary, not mine. Dad carved turkey with ordinary hands. Mom sent flowers. A polite card. No performance, no threat. I set them by the door. Marion raised her glass. To second chances and found family. We clinked paper cups like crystal. I scanned imperfect faces I trusted. Felt space open inside my ribs. Mom may never become the mother I needed. I'm no longer the daughter who begs. Love without respect is a knife. I choose boundaries. I choose myself. And I'm not alone. Peace isn't permission from them. It's a promise to yourself. Have you set boundaries with family? Tell me in the comments. If this helped, subscribe. And share it with someone who needs the words.
The air outside the chapel was sharp with the bite of late autumn, brittle leaves skittering across the pavement as mourners filed into the graveyard. I stood at the edge of the casket, hands clasped, every muscle in my body locked against the grief that threatened to undo me. My father, Harold Hale, had been lowered into the earth with prayers and words of praise that only deepened the hollow ache in my chest. I thought the worst was over until I heard it. Cambria. One word. My name. A sound so foreign, yet instantly familiar, that it cut through me like ice water. My heart stumbled. I turned slowly, black dress shifting against the breeze. There she was, Lorraine Whitlow, the woman who gave birth to me, the same woman who vanished when I was 5, choosing another life and leaving me behind. She had aged, her once bright hair was dyed darker, her face lined, her figure softened, but there was no mistaking her, and she wasn't alone. At her side stood Dorian Whitlow, my older half-brother. He had been 12 when he followed her out of our house, never once looking back. Now he stood taller, his shoulders broad but slouched, his expression guarded as he fixed his eyes anywhere but on me. They lingered at the edge of the gathering like they belonged there, like the past 18 years had not happened. Lorraine placed a hand on Dorian's arm as if to steady herself, though her eyes were locked on me with unsettling intensity. The ground beneath me seemed to shift. The silence of nearly 2 decades had been broken, and with it came the sinking certainty that grief would not be the only weight I carried. I drew in a sharp breath, bracing for what was to come. The moment I saw her at the funeral, my mind snapped back to that night 18 years ago. I was 5, sitting cross-legged on the living room rug with a coloring book, when my father kissed me goodbye and said he'd be back in 2 days. He was driving upstate to look at land for a new project. I waved, certain the house would feel empty without him, but never imagining how quickly it would change. Barely half an hour after his truck disappeared down the road, I heard the sound of drawers slamming upstairs. At first, I thought she was cleaning, but when I climbed the staircase, I saw her throwing clothes into 2 suitcases. My mother wouldn't look at me. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, her movements frantic, determined. "Where are you going?" I asked, clinging to the door frame. "Mommy has to go away for a while," she said without stopping, her voice clipped, as though I were a burden. Behind her, Dorian stood stiffly, already dressed to leave. He didn't meet my eyes. He was 12, old enough to know more than I did, old enough to choose, and he chose her. She left a folded note on the kitchen table, grabbed her bags, and walked out. I remember the sound of the car door slamming, the engine revving, the taillights vanishing into the dark. For 2 days, I lived on cereal and cartoons. I sat on the couch in the same clothes, waiting for someone to come back. When Dad finally returned and found me there, his face shattered in a way I'd never seen. He read the note, crumpled it in his fist, and whispered, "She's finished." The divorce followed quickly, the custody battle non-existent because she never appeared. From that moment forward, it was just Dad and me. And now, after 18 years of silence, they had reappeared together, standing over his grave like nothing had happened. The days after the funeral blurred into a rhythm of condolences, paperwork, and silence that pressed down on me like heavy stone. I kept thinking if I stayed busy enough, the emptiness inside me might ease, but every corner of the house whispered my father's absence. His boots still sat by the door, his work jacket draped across the chair as if he'd return from a job site any moment. It was Malcolm Keene, my father's attorney and longtime friend, who finally brought me back into focus. We met in his office 2 days after the service, the smell of leather-bound books and old wood filling the room. He unfolded the will slowly, as if the weight of it needed to be respected. "Everything," Malcolm said, glancing at me over his glasses. "The company, the house, the investments. Your father left it all to you." My throat tightened as he read aloud the note my father had written, brief but steady in his familiar hand, for the daughter who stood by me when no one else did. "Cambria, you are my legacy." Hearing those words cracked me open. I wanted to argue, to say I wasn't ready, that I was still just his little girl who needed him. But deep inside, a fierce pride pushed against the grief. He trusted me with everything he built, with the empire he carved from sweat and broken ground. I signed the papers with shaking hands, the pen heavy in my grip. The ink bound me to his legacy, but also to the responsibility that came with it. Pride and dread tangled in my chest. I left Malcolm's office carrying more than folders of documents. I carried the knowledge that Dad believed in me completely, and that knowledge, as powerful as it was, made me realize it would not remain a secret for long. 3 days after Malcolm read the will, the knock came, It was a Saturday evening, the house unnervingly quiet. The kind of silence that made me miss Dad's heavy footsteps and the faint hum of his radio drifting from the garage. When I opened the door, the air rushed out of my lungs. Lorraine stood there, dressed in a soft cardigan and jeans, her hair neatly brushed, a look of practiced sorrow on her face. Beside her was Dorian, hands shoved into his pockets, his shoulders rounded as though he wanted to disappear. "Cambria," she said, voice trembling as if rehearsed. "We're family again. We should heal." I didn't invite them in, but she stepped past me anyway, brushing against the threshold like she had every right. Dorian followed, eyes downcast, avoiding mine. I stood frozen, my hand still on the doorknob, before finally closing it with a sharp click. They settled in the living room as though it belonged to them. Lorraine's eyes moving across the furniture, the artwork, the polished wood floors. "Your father raised you well," she said finally, her tone heavy with implication. I stayed standing. "Why are you here to reconnect?" she answered quickly. "After all this time, we're still family." Dorian shifted in his seat but said nothing. Then her words took a sharper turn. "Your father would want you to share with your brother. He would want fairness." I almost laughed, but the anger cut too deep. Fairness, I asked. He left everything to me because he knew who stayed, because he knew who stood by him. Lorraine's expression hardened beneath the mask of grief. "You have more than you'll ever need. Dorian has nothing. He deserves a share." At that, Dorian's gaze flickered up, meeting mine for a moment. There was conflict there, a shadow of shame, but he quickly dropped his eyes again. I realized then this wasn't about reconciliation. Whatever fragile hope had stirred when I first heard her voice at the funeral vanished completely. They hadn't come to grieve. They'd come to circle, to probe, to lay claim, and they weren't going to stop with words. Lorraine leaned forward on the sofa, her hands clasped together as if she were delivering a prayer. "You don't have children, Cambria. You don't have mouths to feed or a household to maintain. Dorian has struggled all these years. Be fair. You have so much more than you could ever need." The words were syrupy, but the undercurrent was sharp, edged with calculation. I felt the weight of my father's handwriting in that will, the line he'd left me for the daughter who stood by me when no one else did. My chest tightened. "Fair," I repeated. "Was it fair when you left me alone at 5 years old with nothing but cereal boxes to survive on? Was it fair when you never looked back? Not once in 18 years. Don't come into this house and speak to me about fairness." Lorraine's lips pressed into a thin line, but before she could fire back, Dorian finally stirred. His voice was low, uncertain, his gaze fixed on the rug. "You don't understand," he said. "Mom did what she had to do. She didn't have a choice." I turned to him, the bitterness rising. Didn't have a choice. She had to stay or go, and she chose to walk away. You went with her. Dorian, neither of you ever came back. His jaw tightened, but he didn't defend himself further. The silence that followed stretched taut. Lorraine broke it, her mask slipping. The warmth in her tone was gone, replaced by a steel edge. "Listen carefully. You're sitting on wealth you didn't build. Your father worked for it, and family should share in it. If you won't give what's fair, we'll make you." The threat lingered in the air like smoke, bitter and suffocating. I felt the shift in her eyes, the way pretense dissolved into naked greed. I stood my ground, my voice steady. "You'll get nothing from me." Lorraine rose, gathering her coat with clipped movements. Dorian followed, silent but pale, his shoulders hunched with something I couldn't read. When the door closed behind them, the house fell quiet again, but the echo of her words remained, and I knew this was only the beginning. The envelope was thick, the kind that never carried anything good. I tore it open at the kitchen counter, scanning the pages until the words blurred. It was a lawsuit. Lorraine and Dorian were suing me for half of my father's estate. I gripped the counter to steady myself as the language leapt off the page. Their lawyer argued that Lorraine had sacrificed years raising me before the divorce, that she contributed to the household as Harold's wife, that she had a rightful claim to the fortune he built. Dorian. The petition read, deserved his portion as the eldest child of Harold's marriage. My pulse hammered. I could see how the narrative might look to someone on the outside, a mother erased from her child's life, a brother cut off. While I sat atop millions, fury burned in me, but beneath it was fear that the system might twist truth into something else. That night, I called Malcolm Keene. His voice was calm, steady as stone. I'm not surprised. He said after I explained, but you needn't lose sleep. Truth is on your side. Truth doesn't always matter in court, I muttered, the bitterness coating my tongue. Maybe not always. He allowed. But we have the records, custody documents, divorce filings, financial history. She abandoned you. She gave up her rights willingly. And as for Dorian, he was never your father's responsibility. We'll fight this. His assurance gave me something to cling to, but the knot in my chest wouldn't loosen. I thought of Lorraine's threat in my living room, if you won't share, we'll make you. Now she was trying to make good on it, using the courts as her weapon. I folded the papers back into their envelope and set them aside, though the weight of them seemed to fill the house. The will my father left me had felt like love written in ink. Now it felt like a target on my back. And with the trial date approaching, I knew they wouldn't stop until they forced me to face them head on. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, the kind of place where truth and lies carried the same weight until someone decided which would matter more. I sat at the defendant's table, my palms damp against the folder Malcolm had handed me, listening as Lorraine's lawyer began his performance. He spoke with practiced sympathy, painting her as a misunderstood mother who had endured hardship and been kept from her daughter by circumstance. He called Dorian the overlooked son, suggesting my father had shut him out while showering me with every advantage. His voice softened at all the right moments. The jury-free hearing nonetheless staged like theater. When Malcolm rose, his voice was different, firm, deliberate, without embellishment. He laid down each fact like a brick, the custody records granting my father full rights after Lorraine failed to appear, the absence of child support, the lack of phone calls, letters, or visits. He handed the judge a stack of documents that spoke louder than sentiment ever could. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Whitlow, why did you make no attempt to contact your daughter after she turned 18? Lorraine shifted in her seat. Eyes darting, I thought it was better to let her live a stable life. Yet you are here now, the judge pressed, claiming you always wanted a relationship. Why now? Her mouth opened and closed, words failing her. Then something cracked. She stood abruptly, her face blotched with red. She's selfish, she shouted, pointing at me. Nobody cares about her. She doesn't deserve any of this. The room went still. Even Dorian flinched, his expression slipping into something that looked like shame. The judge rapped his gavel once. Case dismissed, costs awarded to the defendant. I exhaled, relief and disbelief mingling in my chest. But as I gathered my things, I could feel Lorraine's eyes burning into me, and I knew this was far from over. I had thought the courtroom would be the end. The gavel had fallen, the case dismissed, the judgment as clear as the ink on my father's will. But Lorraine didn't know how to stop. The first phone call came 2 days after the ruling, then another, and another. Different numbers, different tones, sometimes pleading, sometimes venomous. When I blocked one, 2 more would appear. The messages filled my inbox, accusing me of stealing from my real family, calling me heartless, warning that karma would come. Then it stopped being just phone calls. One morning at the office, my receptionist's voice crackled nervously over the intercom. Cambria, there's a woman here demanding to see you. I stepped into the lobby to find Lorraine standing at the front desk, her voice raised so everyone could hear. She abandoned her family. She shouted, pointing at me with trembling fury. She has millions while her brother struggles. Do you all know what kind of person she really is? People gathered from their cubicles, whispering. Dorian stood off to the side, his posture slumped. He didn't shout, didn't even look at me. But he didn't stop her either. He just followed her out when security arrived, his silence saying as much as her words. I locked myself in my office afterward, shaking with a rage that left no room for grief. Enough was enough. I called Malcolm again, my voice low but firm. I want a restraining order. This can't go on. Within days, the paperwork was filed, the evidence compiled, phone records, voicemails, witness statements from my staff. I sat across from Malcolm, signing yet another set of documents, each stroke of the pen drawing a sharper line between us. But as I set the pen down, I wondered if even the law could keep them away. It was easier to dismiss Lorraine's rage than Dorian's silence, her screaming fit in court. Her scenes in public, those were expected. But Dorian haunted me. He never raised his voice, never spat accusations. He just stood beside her, letting her fury spill over us both, his silence turning into complicity. One evening, after yet another appearance outside my office, I followed him out instead of letting him trail after her. We stopped by the parking lot, the glow of a street lamp catching the tired lines under his eyes. "Why do you keep doing this?" I asked. My voice cracked, part fury, part exhaustion. "You never shout. You never fight me. But you never stop her either. Why?" For the first time, he looked directly at me. His jaw worked, like he was chewing over years he'd never spoken aloud. "Because she's my mother. Because since I was 12, she's told me loyalty is all that matters. I believed her. I had to." He rubbed his face with one hand. "But watching you, I see what strength looks like. I don't have that. I don't know how." Something twisted in my chest, pity and anger colliding. "You had 18 years to reach out." I whispered, "And you never did." His eyes flickered with shame. For a moment, I thought he might say more, but instead he turned away. Walking to the car where Lorraine waited, I stood there in the fading light, watching him disappear into her shadow, and knew that silence could cut as deeply as any word. The restraining order came through the next week, promising distance at last. 6 months passed, and the noise around me finally quieted. The restraining order held. Lorraine hadn't called or appeared again, and Dorian had disappeared into the same silence he'd lived in for years. I no longer checked over my shoulder walking to my car, no longer feared the ring of an unfamiliar number. Life had steadied. I poured myself into my father's company, meeting with clients, walking job sites, learning to read the bones of buildings the way he once taught me. The business grew, steady and strong, and for the first time I felt capable of carrying his legacy instead of crushed beneath it. I invested carefully, making decisions with the same patience he had drilled into me. My house was quiet, but it was mine, filled with the life I chose rather than the chaos others tried to impose. On a gray morning in April, I drove to the cemetery with a bundle of fresh lilies. I knelt by my father's grave, brushing leaves from the stone before setting the flowers down. "Dad," I murmured, my voice catching. "I'm trying. I've kept the company strong. I've stayed standing. I think you'd be proud." I spoke to him about the small victories, the loneliness, the weight that still pressed against me at times. Then I let myself sit in silence, letting the wind carry what I couldn't put into words. As I rose to leave, I felt something ease inside me. Real family wasn't the people who shared my blood. It was the father who never left, the grandmother who helped raise me, the friends who stood beside me without asking for anything in return. I walked back to my car lighter than I'd felt in months, carrying peace instead of fear. Mom had already set out the plates when I came upstairs, toast over easy eggs and the exact right amount of hot sauce on the side. She used to do that when I was in high school before early welding practice. For a moment, I let myself believe it meant something. "I'll only be gone 2 days," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Just a maintenance contract at the mill in Brookings. But I start the new job Monday." She nodded, stirring her coffee slowly. "That's great, honey." It sounded like a reflex more than a response. Her eyes didn't leave the phone beside her even when I smiled. "I know it's not a big company like Marotech was, but it's solid pay. Full-time benefits. I'll finally be able to pay off the last of what I owe you." Still no eye contact, just a distracted hum. She typed something and tilted the screen away from me. I focused on my eggs. "Don't make it weird," I told myself. She let me stay when I needed it. She didn't have to. When I stood to rinse my plate, she looked up finally and said, "Drive safe." "I will," I said. She kissed my cheek a little too quickly and pulled me into a side hug like we were performing for someone who wasn't there. Then she went back to her phone. The morning sun cast long shadows as I walked to the car. My duffel bag clanked from the welding gear. I placed it in the trunk like I was packing a new beginning. And as I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back once and saw the curtains move. Just a sliver. Just enough. I turned onto our street around 6:32 hours earlier than planned. The job had wrapped up faster than expected, and I was eager to crawl into bed. My hands still smelled like hot steel and burnt rubber familiar grounding. But as I slowed in front of the house, I saw them. Black garbage bags. Dozens. Lined along the edge of the front lawn, some torn open spilling socks, sweaters, notebooks, even my welding gloves into the patchy grass near the gate. My duffel bag sat upright like it had been thrown and landed wrong. My gaming monitor leaned crooked against the mailbox, unwrapped exposed. And standing just beyond the bags, my mother holding her phone like she was filming a cooking demo. Next to her, Noelle had her arm outstretched selfie style, giving her followers a full view of the spectacle. I could hear her voice before I even got out of the car. "And there she is, back from another business trip, still owing $8,000 in rent. Watch closely, folks. This is what entitlement looks like." Griffin paced like a bouncer with nowhere to go. When he saw me approaching, he smirked, walked up to one of the bags, and kicked it hard enough to send my books skidding into the dirt. Finally, he muttered, "The family freeloader is out for good." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My chest felt like someone had flipped a switch and drained all the air. My mom raised her phone and narrated, her voice polished and performative. "Callista Wren, 29, living in my basement for months like a parasite. No more. This is your eviction notice, public and permanent." Some neighbors stood frozen on their porches. Mrs. Valen across the street held her dog leash with both hands, expression unreadable. Mr. Linton filmed from behind a bush. No one moved. No one said anything. I bent down, slowly picking up the hardcover that had slid from the bag. The cover was bent. I straightened it, set it aside, picked up the next item. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept loading my car piece by piece while Noelle's voice rang out from behind me, narrating every step like it was her job. I closed the trunk gently and turned around one last time. They were still filming, still grinning. "Enjoy the show," I said quietly. "You'll be hearing from me soon." I had just closed the back door of my car when I heard the porch door slam open. My dad marched down the steps, face-red jaw clenched, and without a word, he flung a set of keys toward me. They hit the side of my face with a dull thud and landed in the gravel. "Take your junk and get out," he barked. "You're not our daughter anymore. Real adults don't mooch off their parents at your age." I blinked, rubbed my cheek where the metal had struck, then leaned down to pick up the keys. I didn't flinch, not in front of him. He stood there, arms crossed, waiting for some dramatic meltdown. Noelle had her camera angled for a better shot. Griffin was pacing again, grinning like this was a game he'd already won. I opened the driver's side door, climbed in and shut it with deliberate quiet. Before starting the engine, I looked through the window at all three of them. Mom with her rehearsed indifference, Noelle with her manufactured disgust, Griffin with his practiced cruelty. Then I looked at my dad. He didn't break eye contact, but something flickered confusion maybe when I didn't break either. I turned the key, pulled away slowly, and didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for a while. The familiar streets of the neighborhood blurred into each other. At some point, I ended up in the grocery store parking lot, headlights off, engine running, just sitting there with both hands on the wheel. It wasn't until I reached Lena's apartment, her porch light still on, that I remembered the envelope. It had been sitting at the bottom of my filing bin for over a year. Thick paper. No return address. Just my name in my grandfather's unmistakable handwriting. He'd given it to me at the hospital a few weeks before he passed. Said, "Don't open it unless things get bad." I never thought I'd need to, but now everything inside me said, "Open it." I set my overnight bag on the floor, pulled the envelope from the side pocket, and laid it across my knees. Lena made tea and set it on the table beside me, then slipped into her room without asking questions. She knew I'd talk when I was ready. I stared at the envelope for a long time before I opened it. The flap came up cleanly like it had been waiting patiently all this time. Inside was a folded letter, several notarized documents, and a business card from a law firm downtown. The letter was shorthand written. "Callista, if you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared. I couldn't protect you from them while I was alive, so I'm doing it now. I've placed part of the house, the lake cabin, and the shop building in your name. It's all legal, all documented. You don't owe them anything, not apologies, not silence, not guilt. This is for when they forget what you're worth. Grandpa." The room blurred. My fingers trembled not from sadness, but something sharper, something like clarity. The documents backed it all up. A living trust. My name was listed next to percentages: 40% of the family home, 50% of a lake cabin in Coos County, 35% of the commercial building my dad's business ran out of on Riverdale Street. The business card at the bottom read, "Arthur Dorsey Estate and Property Law." The next morning, I called. His receptionist hesitated until I mentioned my grandfather's name, then offered me a last-minute slot that afternoon. Mr. Dorsey's office was in an old stone building near the university, mahogany furniture, quiet ticking clock walls lined with legal volumes. He remembered me immediately. "You used to come with him to meetings," he said. "Always brought that little red sketchbook." I nodded. He reviewed the documents, carefully flipping through with the kind of precision only decades of practice could build. When he looked up, his expression was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "It's all valid. The trust was finalized before your grandfather passed. They can't legally remove you, sell without your consent, or claim ignorance. If they've been collecting rent or taking loans against any of these, they may have a bigger problem than they realize." I sat back in the chair, my heart still pounding. "I'm ready to proceed," I said. He leaned forward slightly. "Then let's begin." The first text came that night. Noelle, 8:47 p.m. "Hey, hope you're not mad. The stream wasn't meant to embarrass you, it was just content. You know how the algorithm is." I didn't answer. By morning, there were 12 more messages, 2 missed calls from Mom, a voicemail from Griffin. "You're overreacting. It wasn't even that serious. You know how she gets. Just come back and talk like an adult." I forwarded everything to Mr. Dorsey. By midday, Dad's number lit up my screen. "Dad, 1:14 p.m. We need you to sign a few things. No drama, just paperwork. No explanation, no apology. Just instructions like I was an employee who missed a deadline." Mr. Dorsey responded on my behalf with a brief, formal notice that all future communication should go through his office. He CC'd their family lawyer. I turned off read receipts and let the silence do the work. I spent the next few hours organizing the few things I had salvaged. Lena had cleared a shelf for me, and I stacked my books there, less than half my collection, but enough. I folded the clean clothes, placed the monitor carefully by the desk, and stared at the dent in its frame. Then I picked up a pen. It had been years since I kept a journal, but that night I opened a blank notebook and wrote a single line. They only listened when I stopped explaining. The words came easier after that. Not rage, not revenge, just observations. What I saw in their eyes, what I didn't see in their hearts, what I had mistaken for safety. what I would never unsee again. By the time I closed the journal, my phone was still vibrating every few minutes. Noelle's voice memos, Griffin's passive-aggressive guilt, Dad's insistence. I turned the phone face down and let it buzz into the mattress. They were loud. They had always been loud, but this time my silence said more than their shouting ever could. Mr. Dorsey called 2 days later, his voice calm but clipped. "We've finished reviewing the income history on the properties," he said. "Your parents and brother have been collecting rent from the lake cabin and the commercial building. None of it disclosed to you." I closed my eyes. How much? Just over $50,000. 3 years of tenant payments. Your share wasn't even acknowledged. He said acknowledged like it was a clerical oversight. We both knew better. By the end of the day, certified letters had gone out to the family's legal representative outlining the exact amount owed and my ownership percentages. Mr. Dorsey had also contacted the banks involved with the business loans tied to the commercial property. If they had approved financing without all stakeholders' signatures, they were at risk too. The silence that followed was different this time. Not stunned, not wounded. Calculating. 3 days later, Griffin showed up at my new job. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I had just clocked out for lunch and was heading toward the back parking lot when I saw him leaning against the side of my car, arms folded, phone in hand. I kept walking. Didn't stop. "Callista," he said, tone too casual. "You got a minute?" I kept the keys in my grip ready. He stepped into my path. "We need to talk." I looked him straight in the eye. "You're trespassing. Move." He leaned in, voice low and tight. "You're tearing the family apart over some technicality. That money wasn't yours. You want to play this lawyer game? Fine, but it won't end the way you think." I didn't flinch. Step away from my car. A couple of coworkers appeared by the exit. One of them called out my name. Griffin turned to look, then stepped back, muttering something under his breath. "I won't say it again," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is harassment. You need to leave." Security met me by the door minutes later. By then, he was already gone. Back inside, I filed an incident report with the front office and sent the footage from the parking lot camera to Mr. Dorsey. He replied within the hour, noted and logged. Proceeding as discussed. They had made the first move. Now they would learn what it felt like to play defense. They came on a Thursday evening just after sunset. I heard the knock first sharp and impatient, then the voices, too many of them. I walked to the door without opening it. The security camera feed on my phone confirmed what I already suspected, all 4 of them. My mother clutching a tissue, my father with arms crossed and jaw locked, Griffin leaning against the wall like this was beneath him, and Noelle standing off to the side, half watching the door and half scrolling her phone. Callista Mom called out, voice cracking, "Please, honey, we just want to talk. This has all gotten out of hand." Dad stepped forward. "Open the door. You're acting like a child." From behind them, Griffin muttered something I couldn't hear. Noelle didn't look up. I didn't answer right away. I wanted them to sit in the discomfort. Let it soak. Dad knocked again, harder this time. "We are your family. You can't just shut us out over paperwork." I spoke clearly, loud enough for the mic to pick up. "All future communication goes through Mr. Dorsey. You've already been informed of this." There was a pause, like they hadn't expected me to respond at all. Mom's voice came next to thinner now. "You don't have to do this. We can work it out just to the 5 of us. We'll delete the videos. We'll fix it." From the feed, I watched Noelle glance at her phone and tuck it behind her back. She wasn't here for peace. She was here for footage. "I'm not discussing anything without legal representation," I said. "If you remain here, I will contact building security." Dad's face darkened. "So, you're hiding now. Behind lawyers. You told me I wasn't your daughter. Remember?" Griffin looked away. Noelle started typing something. Mom wiped at her eyes suddenly out of things to say. They stood there for another minute. Then they left slowly, without a word. As soon as the hallway cleared, I locked the deadbolt and opened the laptop. Mr. Dorsey had just emailed me a new file marked Settlement Negotiation, Initial Draft. The offer came 2 days later. Their attorney emailed Mr. Dorsey with a proposal they would transfer full ownership of the lake cabin to me if I agreed to forego any claims on the back rent or future income from the commercial building. Mr. Dorsey didn't even hesitate. "We reject," he wrote back. And we restate our original terms. The cabin was worth less than a third of what I was owed. They thought I'd take the bait, let them off the hook in exchange for peace and a symbolic hand-me-down. But I wasn't interested in symbolism. I wanted acknowledgement. I met with Mr. Dorsey the next morning and laid out what mattered to me: a formal payment plan for the unpaid rent, a third-party property management company to handle all future income, and a written admission of financial misrepresentation. "I want it in writing," I said, "and I want it signed." He nodded once. "Then that's what we'll demand." While negotiations crawled, their cracks began to show. Noelle lost over 5,000 followers in a week. Someone from high school had recognized me in her stream and started posting receipts. A few of her sponsors dropped her. She deleted the eviction video, but the internet doesn't forget. Dad's business took a hit too. Turns out one of his clients saw a clip and decided not to move forward with a project. Then a loan application got flagged. When banks started reviewing ownership documents, the trust surfaced. Mom stopped texting. Griffin sent one angry email that Mr. Dorsey forwarded without comment. Noelle tried calling twice. I didn't answer. When their lawyer finally responded, the tone had changed. Less aggressive, more careful. They agreed to everything: monthly payments, third-party oversight, and a written acknowledgement signed by all four of them. I read the document twice before signing. At the bottom, just above my name, I added a sentence of my own. "Truth isn't betrayal. It's what happens when the performance ends." I sent it back and waited. The final part hadn't happened yet. They still had one more thing to do. The apartment was small, but it was mine. One bedroom, uneven floorboards, and a draft in the kitchen window that whistled when the wind picked up. But the lease was in my name, and the first month's rent came straight from my paycheck at the new welding job. No shared space, no borrowed time, no one filming at the door. 2 days after I moved in, the envelope arrived. A check. The first installment of the back rent they owed. Paper-clipped to it was a folded note written in my mother's handwriting. "We hope we can put this behind us and be a family again. Love, Mom." I stared at it for a long time. Not because it moved me, but because of how much it didn't. There was no apology, no ownership, just hope that I'd forget what it cost me to finally be left alone. I placed the check in my drawer. I didn't reply. That night, while unpacking the last box, I found my old external drive. I plugged it in out of habit, scanning the folder labels: college papers, photos, invoices. And then, Grandpa Wav. I clicked play. "Hey, kiddo. If you're hearing this, I guess I'm not around anymore. But I want you to remember something. You're going to be okay, even if they never say they're sorry. Some people only value you when they can use you. And when you stop letting them, they call it betrayal. Let them. You just keep being you." I sat there for a while, letting his voice fill the room. No more shouting, no more silence to weaponize. Just his steady warmth echoing through a borrowed speaker in a place that belonged only to me. I pressed save, backed up the file, and placed the drive in the drawer next to the check.